I smoothed down the front of my ivory silk blouse, feeling the cool fabric against my skin as I stood in the corner of my aunt's living room. The late afternoon sun filtered through tall lace curtains, scattering golden patterns across the carpet. Laughter, the clink of glasses, and the faint smell of roast beef filled the air. A perfect family gathering, at least on the surface. I kept my smile practiced steady. No one here knew the full story of me, not really. To them, I was still just Rachel, the quiet niece who had once been the family's weak link. The girl who was too ambitious for her own good. The one who'd walked away. But then came his voice, sharp, cutting through the hum of conversation. "Funny," my Uncle David said loudly, "how some people can afford nice clothes and fancy things but can't even help out family when they're drowning in debt." Every head turned. Forks paused midair. My chest tightened, but I stood frozen, my wine glass trembling slightly in my hand. His eyes locked on me, the smirk already curling at his lips. It wasn't the first time he'd tried to shame me. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't the same fragile girl who had once swallowed her tears in silence. I lifted my chin slowly, my heartbeat loud in my ears, and thought, not today. Not anymore. The moment Uncle David's voice echoed in that living room, my mind couldn't help but rewind to years ago. Another family gathering, another table, another humiliation. I was 20, barely out of community college, broke, and terrified of the future. My family had gathered in my grandmother's old house, the one that always smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish. Everyone was crowded around the long dining table, voices overlapping, plates clattering. I had dared to mention I wanted to apply for an internship in New York. It wasn't even paid, but it was a chance to get my foot in the door. Uncle David laughed so loudly the sound nearly rattled the silverware. "An internship? In New York? Rachel, you can't even pay for your gas. Who's supposed to fund your little dreams? Maybe you should start by helping out your mother instead of running off to chase fantasies." The words burned hotter than the soup in front of me. My cheeks flushed crimson, and I remember pressing my clammy palms against my lap, nails digging into my skin just to keep from trembling. My throat had tightened so much I could barely breathe, let alone respond. I remember my cousin's awkward chuckle, my aunt lowering her gaze, and the way everyone quickly moved on, as if my humiliation was just another side dish on the table. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat on the porch steps, my chest aching. My grandmother, the only one who never judged me, shuffled out in her old knitted cardigan. She sat beside me and pressed a tiny silver locket into my palm. Inside was a pressed violet, delicate but still intact. "Plant your own roots, Rachel," she whispered. "Even violets grow through cracks in the stone. You don't need permission to bloom." I held that locket so tightly, it left an imprint in my skin. That was the moment something shifted inside me. I realized no one was coming to rescue me, no one was going to cheer me on. If I wanted a future, I had to carve it myself. And so, with my grandmother's words echoing in my ears and that fragile violet tucked close to my heart, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for their approval. I was going to leave, no matter how terrified I was. That night was the first night I stopped being the girl who stayed silent. Leaving home wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no final speech. Just me, a duffel bag stuffed with thrift store clothes, my grandmother's silver locket pressed against my chest, and a bus ticket out of town. The night air smelled of diesel and rain when I boarded, my stomach twisting with equal parts fear and hope. New York was loud, merciless, and exhilarating. My apartment was a shoebox with peeling paint and a radiator that hissed like a snake, but it was mine. Rent ate almost every cent for my waitress job, and still, I found myself staying up until dawn, poring over online tutorials, teaching myself graphic design on a secondhand laptop. There were nights I cried into stale coffee, staring at the glowing screen, wondering if Uncle David had been right. Maybe I was chasing fantasies. But then I'd reach for the locket, feel the cool metal in my palm, and hear my grandmother's voice. "Plant your own roots." My first break came from a woman named Linda Chong, an art director at a boutique marketing agency. She noticed the logo mock-ups I'd posted on a free portfolio site. I'll never forget the email subject line. Would you be interested in freelance work? My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped my phone. Linda wasn't the type to coddle. She critiqued me sharply, pushed me to refine, demanded excellence. But she also believed in my potential, something I hadn't felt from my own family. With her mentorship, I landed my first paid client. It was only $200, but it felt like $1 million. The climb was brutal. I worked doubles at the diner, then spent nights sketching brand identities and website layouts. I patched holes in my sneakers with duct tape, skipped meals to pay software subscriptions, and turned down every invitation that cost money. But slowly, the wins stacked up. A bakery chain loved my rebrand and recommended me. A startup hired me for their pitch deck, and that project snowballed into referrals. Within 2 years, I registered my own design firm, Hayes Creative Studio. I hired interns, then employees. The girl with the duct tape sneakers was suddenly leading meetings with CEOs. Still, I kept everything hidden from my family. On social media, I posted vague updates, a blurry coffee cup, a skyline shot, nothing that revealed how far I'd come. Part of me feared jinxing it. Another part still remembered their laughter too vividly. But late at night, alone in my high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, I'd watch the city lights glitter and whisper to myself, "You did it, Rachel. You planted your roots." The locket sat on my desk, always within reach. A pressed violet inside, fragile yet unbroken. Just like me. And though my family thought I was still scraping by, the truth was I had built something powerful, something they'd never see coming. The living room grew quiet after Uncle David's jab. My aunt's hand froze midair, holding a platter of bread rolls. My cousins exchanged glances, waiting for the show. That was the thing about my family, they loved drama, as long as it wasn't their own. I could feel the weight of every eye on me. My fingers tightened around my wine glass until I set it down, afraid it would shatter in my grip. "Rachel." Uncle David pressed, his voice dripping with false innocence. "Surely someone as successful as you could lend a little help. Or are you too busy buying silk blouses while your family struggles?" The old me would have shrunk, cheeks burning, voice trembling. But not now. I inhaled slowly, letting silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Finally, I smiled. Not wide, not sweet, but sharp enough to make him flinch. "You're right, Uncle David," I said calmly. "I do own nice clothes. I also own something else. Would you like to see it?" A murmur rippled through the room. His smirk faltered, but he shrugged. "What could you possibly show us?" "Why don't you all come by tomorrow?" I replied, slipping my phone from my clutch and typing out an address. "Lunch is on me." The next afternoon, they arrived. One by one, cars pulled up in front of a sleek glass building in downtown Manhattan. Hayes Creative Studio gleamed in bold letters across the entrance. I stood waiting in the lobby, dressed in a tailored navy dress, my heels clicking against marble floors. The reception desk was lined with awards, plaques, and framed features from design magazines. My employees, polished, professional, moved briskly around, nodding respectfully as they passed me. My family stared, mouths slightly open. "This is yours," my cousin whispered. I nodded, leading them into the main conference room. Expansive windows framed the skyline, the Empire State Building glowing in the distance. On the walls hung framed brand campaigns, vibrant, modern, bold. My designs. My work. Uncle David shuffled inside, his swagger noticeably dimmed. "You run this place?" he stammered. I rested my hands on the sleek oak table, letting the silence stretch again before I spoke. "I don't just run it. I built it. From the ground up." Hayes Creative Studio works with national brands, international clients, and employs 30 people. Their eyes widened. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My younger cousin whispered, "Oh my God." I straightened, my voice steady, but laced with the weight of years. "For years, you all assumed I was barely scraping by. And I let you, because I didn't need your approval. Every late night, every sacrifice, Every doubt I swallowed. It brought me here.
To this.
Uncle David looked pale.
His lips opened, then closed.
I leaned closer, locking eyes with him. And now you stand in my office, trying to shame me for not paying your debts? Tell me, Uncle David, who's drowning now? The room fell silent, thick with shock and disbelief. My chest rose and fell, adrenaline thrumming through my veins, but my face remained calm, controlled. For the first time in years, I wasn't the girl sitting silent at a dining table while others laughed. I was the woman who had carved her place, planted her roots, and bloomed in full view of the city. And now there was no hiding it. The silence in the conference room stretched until I could hear the faint hum of the air vents. My family sat around the long oak table, their expressions a mix of awe, shame, and disbelief. Uncle David's face was blotchy, his usual arrogance stripped away. I folded my hands neatly in front of me, my voice calm but unyielding. Family is important to me. But for years, family meant I had to stay small so others could feel big. It meant swallowing insults, being dismissed, being mocked for daring to dream. That ends today. My mother shifted uncomfortably, her eyes shining with tears. My cousins avoided my gaze. But Uncle David, still clinging to scraps of pride, muttered, "So what? You're rich now. You could help me." I looked at him steadily. Help isn't just money, Uncle David. Help is accountability. Help is learning to stand on your own 2 feet instead of pulling others down. If you want my support, here are my terms. He blinked. Terms? Yes, I said firmly. You enroll in financial counseling. You stop gambling away your paychecks. And you apologize not to me, but to every family member you've borrowed from and belittled. Until then, not a single dollar. He looked stunned, but before he could protest, I turned to the others. To my cousins, I continued, my tone softening. Don't let anyone shame you out of chasing your dreams. If you want to study, start a business, create art, do it. I'll mentor you, even invest in you. But only if you're serious and willing to work hard. Their eyes lit up, a spark of possibility flickering where doubt had lived. And to the rest of you, I said, scanning the table, if we want to call ourselves family, then the gossip, the judgment, the small-minded cruelty has to stop. I built a life without your approval, but I'd rather not live without your respect. That's the only way forward. No one spoke. The weight of my words hung heavy in the air. I could see the shift happening, the discomfort of being called out, the dawning realization that I wasn't asking anymore. I was setting the rules. For the first time, compassion and strength didn't feel like opposites inside me. They worked together, steady and clear. I wasn't here to punish, but I wasn't here to be diminished either. I leaned back slightly, giving them space to breathe. I've already planted my roots, I said quietly. If you want to grow with me, you'll need to do the same. Across the table, Uncle David dropped his gaze, his shoulders slumping. For once, he had no clever retort. The power had shifted, and it wasn't going back. The days after that confrontation felt strangely quiet. For once, there were no snide remarks, no backhanded comments, no dismissive laughter when I spoke. My family seemed different. Uncle David avoided me for a while, but eventually, I heard from my mother that he had signed up for a financial counseling program. He hadn't apologized yet, but even the smallest shift in his stubborn pride was something. My cousins began texting me late at night, asking about internships, scholarships, even book recommendations. For the first time, their voices didn't carry that note of defeat. They carried curiosity.
Hope.
It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't overnight. But something had changed. One evening, after a long day of client meetings, I returned to my apartment. The city outside my window glowed with its endless heartbeat of lights and noise. I set my heels aside, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at my desk. There, in its usual place, was my grandmother's silver locket. I opened it carefully, gazing at the tiny pressed violet inside. Still delicate, still intact. I smiled. That locket had carried me through the nights when I felt invisible, when words like my uncle's almost convinced me to quit. It reminded me that even the smallest root could grow through stone. And now, holding it again, I realized I had become that violet, fragile once, but blooming anyway. I thought back to the girl sitting on a porch, cheeks wet with silent tears, clutching this very locket in her palm. I wished I could tell her that she'd make it, that she'd find her voice, her power, her place. But maybe, in some way, she already knew. I closed the locket gently and whispered into the quiet room, almost like a vow. I was never selfish for choosing myself. I was never weak for walking away. And when Uncle David tried to shame me, all he really did was prove what I already knew: I never needed saving. I was the storm, and I learned to dance in the rain.